This is Richie coming at you from the School of Marketing HQ. Before you dive into the show, I just want to tell you about a brand new short 12-week program we've launched called the Giants Marketing Masterclass. The program gives you access to insights and expert comments from over 25 CEOs and CMOs from major companies like Unilever, L'Oreal, M&S, Pret, and WPP, just to name a few. We focus on 6 key areas of marketing: customer, brand, commercial, creative, channel, and data and analytics. So if you were looking to upskill yourself or your team for just 2.5 hours each week and get access to a network with our industry's giants through our live sessions, do check out the School of Marketing website for more deets. Alrighty, for now, enjoy the show.
Well, hello everybody and welcome back to 2023, a new year, a new dawn, and a brilliant guest to kick off the year. Very welcome to the show, Laura Beckingham.
Hi, thank you. Great to be here.
Well, Laura, honestly, I can think of no better way to start off the year, particularly as very, very deliberately we're kicking off on Blue Monday, which is obviously one of the most depressing days of the year. And so Richie and I proudly bring you, Laura, as the perfect antidote to that. And I could say Laura is a coach, but that would be massively underselling it because Laura is no ordinary coach. Just in terms of background, I met Laura on a residential retreat type thing in 2021, where Laura shared some practices around reflection and restoration. And then I had another dose, maybe it's becoming an annual dose, I don't know, Laura, but another dose in 2022. And I just thought that Laura would be the perfect guest for Blue Monday. She's also given me some fantastic advice at this moment as I start the next chapter of my career, introducing me to what's called the liminal space, which is somewhere between no longer and not yet, which I am actually really currently in. But in terms of what Laura does, Laura runs a business called Space Within and has a brilliant podcast called Calm Down, Wake Up. And one of her signature programs is called Slow Down, Step Back, See More. So you're starting to get a theme here. So Laura has worked with many people and businesses to help them get perspective, pay attention, and perhaps to only act when there is a true and healthy move that benefits the whole system. So Laura embraces the counterintuitive and uncomfortable and finds the sweet spot that brings everything into focus. And from that point, everything becomes possible. Now, before all this, Laura had a more conventional career in HR in companies like Sainsbury's and Centrica before pursuing her own path. But she describes herself as a fantasist and a troublemaker. And I love the way that, Laura, I will come into this, you describe fear is just excitement without breath. So anyway, lock yourself in. And as I said, the perfect antidote in these challenging times. Welcome again, Laura, on Blue Monday.
Thank you so much. Can I just say, Mark, I don't think I've ever had a very skilled marketeer play me back to myself. And that was both beautiful and terrifying.
This is our gift to you.
Thank you.
How wonderful. And it's so nice to hear, Mark, that, you've been able to have some exposure to Laura over the years as well. So it's a great moment in time, Laura. Thank you for being on. I love the thought of slowing down, and perhaps that's maybe we can pick up. I mean, I think too many of us live our lives in full speed ahead. And in fact, I think we're all perhaps even classically trained to do so. And yet I think it's very counterintuitive, particularly in these times. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about slowing down and what's the importance of that.
Yeah. Thank you, Richie. Yeah, it's I feel very passionately about this. I try and hold my beliefs quite lightly, which is challenging at times. But just over the years, I see more and more that we are so conditioned. And commercial life, big business, family life, society, all of it's just so fast, isn't it? We know this. It's not new information. And there's something so deep, I think, in terms of the possibility when we slow down. So when I invite people that work, for example, in senior roles in big business to slow down, our first instinct is to go, well, no, because what will I miss? And, what will that mean? And what will that cost me? But the interesting thing about slowing down is that I really believe that when we slow down, and I say step back, right, get perspective on stuff, we definitely see more. So I think that the people that are able to access that ability, capacity, It's not easy, but I believe that it brings a real edge actually to what we do. So, I'm sure it's certainly in your world, people are, always wanting to kind of look for the next opportunity, right? Or what's the differentiator? How do we do it differently? What's really going on in the context that we want to speak to? If we're always traveling at pace, we're going to miss stuff. So to me, it's kind of slowing down in a way that allows us to see more of what's going on and to really kind of act in a way that's very relevant, needed, useful. And it's lovely, right? People really want it, but we always, me as well, we resist it. So we both want it desperately, and then we get it and we're like, oh, what do I do with this now? So it's a capacity that we're, I think, collectively and individually learning how to make sense of.
My feeling is that there's, for some people, and I'm maybe talking personally as well, there's almost a sense of guilt around slowing down.
Yeah.
But the thing that you've said, I think, is really important, is we shouldn't confuse slowing down with any lack of ambition. And it's the connection between being focused through slowing down and actually achieving more, doing more. You're in no way helping people to be less ambitious. You're helping them to be more ambitious. And I think that's the link that people often don't get. So how does that practically work into being able to do more by slowing down?
Yeah, it's definitely that. It is really that. And that's what I mean when I say we instinctively in our modern lives go, that's going to cost me something. It's going to mean I do less, or, I'm apathetic, or it's passive. And it really isn't when you can access it as a kind of real quality inside yourself and have practices that support it. I just think that simply when we move too fast, we miss stuff. So I feel like if you're a person that is, alive in the world, that wants to have a good impact, it's something that you need to learn. At a very practical level, there are so many different aspects to it. But, first, I think recognizing that that it's there, that there could be potential in it, and meeting your own resistance in relation to that, right? The part of you that really wants it, the part of you that doesn't. And finding ways to do it. So I could say a lot about that without getting too detailed. For me, it's things like quiet time, quiet practices, being able to be with oneself rather than always needing to be with other people. So kind of tuning out some of the noise. It's good rest. So it's all the stuff that we might say, self-care. But it's beyond that. It's like a deeper agreement within yourself that there might be a different way to show up in life, or an additional way to show up in life. And can I just offer something a little bit wild, because I can't help myself. It's not really wild, but I'm a big believer that our ancestral stories really kind of impact how we show up in the now. And evolutionarily, we've sort of come from a place where so many, not all, but so many of our ancestors had to work hard, on the clock, go fast. There was no space in people's lives historically, in reality, for slowing down. And we sort of arrive in the 21st century and go, oh, I have the luxury of, I could if I wanted to, not always, but maybe I have resources that enable me to do it. And yet there's something underneath in all of us that's kind of feels guilty. You said that, Mark. I think a lot of that comes from there. What will happen if, and we're not in these places anymore. We can, most of us, albeit in different ways, touch in on some of these ideas and practices around slowing down. But something deeper kind of goes, I'm not going to, it's too risky. So there's the cognitive and there's the, the kind of felt, emotional, intuitive, embodied sense of whether or not we should or we shouldn't.
So to land that into 2023, it's been a couple of hellish years with the pandemic, and 2023 looks pretty ropey, particularly in the UK, maybe relative to some countries and economies. What are your observations of what you're seeing in people as a result of maybe the chronic stress that's out there?
Yeah. It's a great question. I mean, it definitely varies, I would say, in context. It's probably an obvious thing to say, but I'm always curious about what's in the collective. I think that people are, I mean, it sounds really cliche to say people are tired. My sense is they're less tired than they were. I often, during the pandemic, I described what was happening as like being a chronic illness. In the first few weeks and months of the pandemic, it was almost like there'd been a trauma accident, and someone was bleeding out and we had to stem the bleed, and then it turned into something much more chronic, underlying, and that manifests in things like lethargy and confusion and those kind of slower lower energies, I would say. And I think we're sort of still in the fog of that. That's my sense. But also that there's this. I do feel people's fire coming back. It's almost like the flame can burn a little bit brighter because there's a bit more oxygen. Literally, we're allowed out and about. We can move, we can connect, we can consider, we can think about the future. And then, of course, the outlook economically is, we're told, pretty bleak. So I think there's confusion. I think there are moments of clarity. My sense is that what people need is more connection with their understanding of what's going on, rather than kind of being brainwashed. There seems, I think, if we could all sort of find a bit more of our individual place in context, because we don't live in a vacuum, then we might feel a bit more agency, and then some of that fire could be used more effectively. That's my sense. And when I say about the fire, I'm meaning things like, there's a bit more anger. I'm feeling a bit more like, this is not okay, and what's happening with, and like people having opinions again on stuff that they might not have had capacity to connect with. Yeah. So there's energy, and I'm not entirely sure that it's we know what to do with it. We can channel it yet. So something about streamlining or discernment. That's my sense of the kind of thing that's needed. That's hard, right? How do we do that?
It's super, super hard. And I love the framing around the fog and confusion. And I really do feel that a lot of people are at that moment, whether that be big life shifts or on the cusp of them, and really having a sense that of an unknown direction for a lot of them. And particularly, when you look at the macroeconomic outlook, when you add in the historic last couple of years, it feels like there's a real tension rubbing up against each other between the past and the future. And I think that's really creating a very difficult moment in time for people to cognitively make sense of things. And I wondered if you have any thoughts around how can people maybe deal with that a bit better.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I'll come back to slowing down, right? It's like if we're just constantly moving at speed, we're constantly in a fog. So what can we do to disrupt our own state? I mean, that's a good way to think about slowing down. It's slowing down as a thing, but it's also slowing down as a contrast to the sort of general thing. And I know Mark knows this of me, that I'm really interested in contrast, and how do we bring more. I'll say the word capacity again. I know I've said it already, but I do use it a lot. How do we bring more texture and more? How do we navigate our own spectrum inside ourselves so that we can just take different slices, essentially, and experience life in different ways, in such a way that we wake and shake our own selves up, so that we can. Because none of this is changing, is it? We know it's so cliched, but we know the flavor of it keeps changing. But oh, it's this now. Oh, it's this now. Is it ever going to be any different? We've got to find ways to exist a bit more healthily in that, chaotic context. Just the new now, isn't it?
Yeah. You mentioned contrast, shaking ourselves up. I was describing yourself as a troublemaker. So how do we get here from the fact that you did the corporate jungle thing for a few years, and here you are, moved on and up into, I would say, a slightly more interesting space in terms of helping people, very enlightened, life balance. So tell us a little about the journey, Laura.
Yeah. God, troublemaker. I'm like, yes, yes, and I'm like, there's a part of me that's like, oh shit, what does that mean? Excuse my language. Yeah, so I spent like 12 years. I think it was about 12 years in in two big corporates here in the UK, predominantly. And I think I was always a bit of a troublemaker, to be honest. I mean, my family would definitely describe me as that, not in a like naughty way, but in a kind of like to mix things up. And a lot of people experience me now as very calm, and I am, but I'm also, I'm like, where's the juice in life? And so I'm the youngest child in my own family of origin, and then in my kind of wider family, the youngest cousin, in a big family, a big Catholic family that's very like close. And so I think I sort of arrived into life as somebody who was like, hey, I'm kind of here and I can do it in my way, and what you're going to do about it. Not in a nasty troublemaking way, but in a kind of mixing things up way. And in my corporate career, probably very similar. I think people, if we put a nicer, more refined wrapper on it, people might say, oh, disruptive. I was often described, and it was cherished as well. It was prized in many ways as a disruptor, often the black hat in the room, not because I'm pessimistic, but because I want to talk about the thing that we're not talking about, not keep talking about the thing that we are talking about. So there's that. And yeah, one day when I was working for Centrica, I just had a real moment it wasn't a moment, it was a series of growing moments, but I had a real epiphany of, I'm just in the wrong place. I know that I'm most useful in life when I'm in chaotic contexts, and working in one organization, even though it was it's a FTSE 100 business, it's ginormous, it just wasn't textured enough for me. I like to feel really secure in my personal life, but I like to feel in my work and my contribution to the world like I'm sort of at the edges of things. And so I made a decision to leave. It was pretty spontaneous. It wasn't particularly elegant. I was in my early 30s, and I look back now and I'm like, I would advise people to always make that decision if it's there. Would I say I did it well? Not necessarily. And then I set up this organization. It was always probably on the cards. I'd done work like this internally as well. And this business now that I've run for 10 years has become an extension of that. So it is kind of squiggly. I would say it was like a straight line, and then there was a threshold, and now it's spirals and wiggliness all over the place.
You talk about elegant exits. This expression, quiet quitting. So you didn't do that.
No, but I went to work one day and my boss handed me my pay review letter and my bonus letter, and we know what that kind of thing would have been like back then. And she said, "How are you enjoying your job?" And I said, "I'm not." No, it's like the words were kind of out of my mouth.
Yeah, but obviously you've got on to achieve great things. But I guess it's been organic and iterative. So tell us about some of the highs and lows of going your own way.
Yeah, it's a lovely question. I mean, in general, I love it. I really love it. And often people will say, gosh, that must be really hard. And honestly, I know this is not true for everybody, but for me, I haven't found it hard. What I found harder was being contained in a very narrow or relatively narrow context. There are, some of the lows, I'll start there. I mean, I miss having a team. I always had very big teams all over the place. I miss that. I miss the sense of, although it's just changed shape, that's the reality. I miss the sense of, almost that tribal sense of really belonging to a very specific organization or, context. Being your own boss is wild. I'm like, oh, so it's me. And that sense of if I don't get up and go to work, I'm not going to earn any money. Nothing's going to get done. I remember leaving, I had a PA in my last job who was wonderful. And I remember leaving and being like, well, who's going to do all that stuff? And I was like, oh, that's me. So, that's just an example of that realization that so much is on you. And then the flip of that coin is that I love the accountability. I love that sense of skin in the game. Really, I really feel more present in the center of my own life. And I've had some amazing experiences. Traveled the world. I get to work with amazing people. This week I've been out 4 days in a row. each morning with a different senior exec in a big business, and we walk and talk in the weather, whatever the weather is. So this week that's been rain and wind, and we sit on a bench or sit on a log in a forest and we drink tea wearing jeans and trainers. And sometimes I'm like, this is my life and I love it. I get to spend time with really interesting people who are curious about how they show up in the world and the contribution they can make. And I get paid to do that, and I get to express myself as I wish. And I'll just close there with that by saying that I think that's the biggest gift, is the freedom to actually really choose how I express myself. And of course that carries a lot of risk, but you know what? It's amazing to be like, all right, yeah, okay, it's on me.
Mm. No regrets, no looking back. Obviously, the point of particularly having you on today, Laura, is about Blue Monday, and you just mentioned there your walking meetings, and so through this session, hopefully people will pick up some things that will help if they're struggling in this moment. Tell us a little bit more about that practice of walking meetings, and maybe one other top tip.
Yeah. Well, it came from, the background to that is that, it just basically came from me being sick. I used to say I'm sick of sitting in beige boxers. Like, I'm just sick of it. That was part of why I left corporates. And that was 10 years ago, right? Back when we really did do that a lot. And so I was like, if I'm going to work for myself, how do I want to do it? I like trees. I like the river. I love tea. Let's do that. I can wear my jeans. Brilliant. So there's something kind of representative in that, I think, like, where are the places where we can come dressed as ourselves? How can we take ourselves, even if it's just infrequently, but sometimes, to the places and spaces that nourish us? I really believe that, we can always find that wherever we are. I mean, I live in Zone 5, London, so, reasonably suburban, but still the city. No matter where you are, you can take a moment, right? There's always a tree that you can go and sit under. There's always a bench that you can stop on. You might not have time to sit for half an hour and drink tea in ceremony like I do, but you can still take one mouthful of your cup of tea, just quietly. I'm just going to have this 30 seconds to stop. So I think walking is the walking and kind of being outside is a thing, but it's also representative of how we can just, again, mix up what we do, but in really accessible ways. It doesn't have to be in one of the podcasts that I run, where I talk to senior people in business about their own practices that support them. The intro to that, I say, you don't have to sack it all off and run up the mountain, run to the hills to live a quieter, more peaceful life. You can access that in the midst of really fast, full and modern living. And then another top tip. I mean, there are many, but if I was to give one today, I would say that being in connection with your own body, that we are more than heads on sticks. I say that a lot. I think it really came to the fore when we moved to Zoom, and we literally became heads in squares. That we are animals. We have a body. It feels stuff. Even if that's just at the level of sensation, if you don't have language for things like emotion, how do you, acknowledging it's there and finding ways over time to bring that into your experience more, not least because it's a wonderful source of data. When the head gets stuck, the head's great. I'm not anti the brain, but it's not the only thing that we are. There's other stuff too. And that can be as simple as sitting for a few minutes every day and breathing quietly. It can be going for a walk and feeling your feet on the floor. It can be going to the gym, playing sport, laughing. There's kind of formal stuff and more informal stuff, I think, that brings us into our body. But yeah, the more time I spend in business, the more I see that the people that can navigate it well are those that have good contact with their, we'd call it somatic experience, the experience of the body as well as the thinking mind.
One of the most interesting things you mentioned to me, Laura, was in terms of interacting with other people, you need to meet people where they are. Can you say a bit more about what's behind that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I recognise that. Fascinating that it's jumped out to you. What would I say about that? Well, I think that it's easy to think that your experience is the experience. It's, and it's part of the experience, but it's not the whole experience. Um, in the past, when I was more, this is how I do things, this is my way, it's very easy, I think, to just kind of push through and knock everybody to the side, or to maybe do the opposite and over worry about what's going on for others and not recognize your own experience. But we're all different, I suppose. And I think what I mean by that is that part of the skill at being able to, connect well, get things done. I don't mean maliciously or with any malevolence, but actually make things happen. Influence, let's say, is to pay attention. And if somebody, for example, is very heady, somebody who likes to use their thinking mind a lot, me walking in and being like, right, now we're going to, they'll be like, well, what on earth is that? And then I just lose them straight away. So if I can find a way to kind of speak to their reality, I can then make a bridge into something else that might be possible. So I think it's about compassion, courtesy, connection, but it's also a very savvy way to make things happen. Because everybody's experience is different, and we can knock around, rattle around life thinking that we're in an echo chamber, but we're not.
Yeah, it reminds me, and I have said this a couple of times in the 100-odd episodes we've done, that phrase, be kind, everyone you meet is fighting a great battle. And then brackets, of course, as are you. So you have influenced and helped many people and businesses. What have been some of the biggest wins? Punch the air, high fives, you've nailed it.
Gosh, that's a powerful question. It kind of hits me in my belly, and I'm like, oh, how do I answer that and not be real and not from a place of ego? Do you know, if I'm really honest with you, and like on paper, I think I've said this to you, I don't talk openly about like the types of, the specific organizations that I work with, or the people. I never name my clients, because I think this work is very sacred, and so they can do that, but I don't personally. And yet on paper, like, some of it's really jazzy, like flying to Asia with banks, for example, or getting flown out to the west coast of the US with big tech companies to do that. Those kinds of things on paper are like, oh, people be like, wow, Laura does that kind of work. But the sweetest moments are like it's the individual moments, it's the moments like when we first met and we were on that offsite together, that residential. It's the moment of standing, watching you all lying on the grass, just breathing. It's like almost like on paper, that's like a nothing. The shiny bit of that would be, oh, I went here and did that, and these people do this. But the real sweet moment is that. And the moments where people, are able to touch in on something really true for them, remember something they've forgotten, listen to themselves and make a true movement, like I often talk about. To me, those are the sweetest things. Those are like the things that I cherish. So they're kind of not punch the air moments, but internally they're really expansive. And they're the bits that remind me that this work is useful. I get things wrong, but largely I'm on the right path. It's not about me, it's about what it enables. That's the stuff that I love.
Yeah, I'm sure you've created hundreds, if not thousands, of special moments. And for the record, yes, we all were lying on the grass at a residential, having a ball of the time, frankly.
Barefoot.
Yeah. So you mentioned ego. Important. We've all got one. We've all got one to protect, but can get in the way. Yeah. What's the balance around that? Even in that question, in that moment, you were sort of wrestling with it a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it's always there, right? Where people, for me personally, it's a difficult one, because I could spout out loads of psychological models about, what is ego, but how I experience that is like, I go to like, what's the answer I think I should give, or what's the, what does my head say? And the balance for me isn't always coming back. A bit like what I said before about being in the body, like that's what might sound good, what feels true. But also holding that lightly, because I could argue that like, oh, this is going like existential now, but that what feels true is also my ego. I'm like, So I think to me, ego is understanding our ego is just having awareness of like where we get trapped, where we get stuck, where we are more out of ourselves than in. Yeah, I'll say that again, holding it all lightly, right? And any given moment, things change. Is anything even true? Does it even matter? You know, all these are the big like philosophical questions. So I guess I kind of, I like to laugh at myself a lot, you know, and be open about that. Like, is this what I'm even saying now nonsense? Maybe, possibly. Does it matter? Not really. You know, will people learn from it? Maybe. Will some? Yes. Will some think it's weird? Yes. So what? Right? We're all just trying our best, aren't we? And kind of showing up. Is my intention good and true? Would be something I ask myself to stay anchored. Am I listening and paying attention at all the levels?
Yeah, well, just to reassure, it's not nonsense, save for the fact that we might all be living in a computer simulation. But you know, if it, as you say, if it comes with the right intent, it's never nonsense. So you know, you've still got decades ahead. Where are you looking to take your practice, your business? What are you ambitious for?
On my website, I say the real nub of this work is about supporting people like you to clear the ground from under your feet so that the people who come after you can walk well in the world. That might be your children, it might be the people that you work with in a leadership capacity, it might be your community. It doesn't mean you have to be a parent. So I guess what I'm ambitious for is more of that, more of not fixing things that are wrong, because I think even that's too tight and we can get a bit grippy about it, but really supporting more people, enabling people who are in positions of influence, largely in organizations, because like it or not, that's, you know, our world, right? So I'm not, people are like, oh, secretly, are you here to like, you know, tear down capitalism structure, you know, capitalistic structures? And I'm like, well, no, because that's a lot bigger than me. So good luck with that. But actually, how can people in those organizations and those setups in particular be a bit more tender, be a bit more aware of the stuff that hooks them, a bit more aware of their own patterns? How can I support them to learn to listen a bit more to themselves, to others, to the world around them? It's that kind of thing. So that when they are making decisions, at least those decisions are connected. They may not be good, but can they be true? Can they be in service of the flow of life, right? Gosh, that sounds quite highfalutin, and it's small movements. But the exciting thing about my particular job is, you know, working with people at levels of organizations or in positions where they can influence that monetary policy, you know, economic policy, political policy, whatever. And they're serving billions of customers a week. I get quite excited about how the small moments can enable something at a meta level, or macro at least.
Yeah, the dots are enormous. I had a Lion King moment when you talked about flow of life, but then it came back to, you know, politics and the connections are all there. So I just want to touch on recovery. So you know, you will have had setbacks. We all do. So, you know, in parallel to Blue Monday, all the time people are having knockbacks, setbacks, bang-ups, hang-ups. And this show is all about squiggliness. So can you talk to some of your own personal perspective on recovering from setbacks?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's daily, right? I mean, every day something happens to me where I'm like, oh, that didn't go how I thought it might, or could I have done that better? I'm not a fan of the word resilience. I think it's not the concept of it, but the sort of energetics of it sometimes, I think, can speak to, when people say resilience to me, I often feel kind of constricted and quite tight, like I have to batten down the hatches, I have to tighten up, I have to, you know, get a bit harder and let a lot less in. Where actually my sense of, and I can speak to my own story in a minute, but my sense of what's needed is more space to let more of it pass through you. So for me, more generally, it's like how can I let that be? How quickly can I let it go? You know, it's like a soft opening movement rather than a, you know, what should I have done differently? It doesn't mean I don't reflect on that, but it's gone, it's been, life is now, and its movement is forward. So it's very soft and kind of nebulous for me. I mean, I've had loads of setbacks. I look back and think, what did I do that for? God, that was rubbish. And I can go from like the sort of granularity of like my first few jobs in Sainsbury's. I was on the retail scheme, the retail graduate scheme, and like running shops, like running supermarkets, like at the age of like 23, 24, and having the keys to a supermarket that took, I don't know, just over £1 million a week and had 60,000 customers a week and 600 colleagues and a pharmacy and a petrol station. And thinking, I really don't know what I'm doing, or, oh, I've left the shop and I forgot to put the money in the safe, or, these things that at the time feel ginormous, but in reality don't really matter. Right through to things like, I didn't love my time at Centrica. I've been very open about that. There's nothing wrong with the business. The people were lovely. It just wasn't my fit. So that was like a 2.5 year setback on paper because I didn't love it. And yet I learned from it. So I'm always about kind of mining the gold as well. It's cliched, but there's always a lesson. Yeah, and there's always a blessing. How can I keep cultivating myself so that I can see both, and both can be part of my experience of life. So as I say all that, I know it can sound a bit like, but this is the product of 15 years, 20 years, I suppose, almost, of looking at these questions and being alive with them, because they're not answered. They're ongoing.
What you've demonstrated there has reminded me of something that, shout out to Frith Hookway, said, that we have an amazing capacity to become reductive. What in the moment feels like a tremendous drama, I didn't put the money in the safe, over time becomes, the book becomes a chapter, becomes a page, becomes a sentence, becomes a couple of words, and it passes, and time, things pass. And you've just demonstrated that. I'm sure it wasn't great when you didn't lock up.
Oh no! I mean, there's been loads. There's a fire in the shop. There's been a fire, and in the building above the store. And I worked in this Sainsbury's store that was like a model of based on a Harrods or a Harvey Nicks food hall. So it was on the King's Road, Chelsea Bluebird it was called. It was like this really fancy proposition, and I was one of the managers there. And this day I was running the shop, and I walked in the morning, there'd been a fire overnight and all the sprinkler system had gone on. And that morning Jamie Oliver, actually no word of a lie, was coming to the store to record some content in our chef station. You have these moments of like, but you're right, they just become little breaths of air that pass through your life, and they've been and gone. And also, it's happened. So what are you going to do about it? You can't rewind time and stop it from happening. You've got to deal with what's here now.
Yeah. Lovely, Laura. Well, so we've come more or less to the end. Last question. And again, linking back to Blue Monday, and putting a spring in people's stride. No pressure. What are you optimistic for? That could be for yourself, for people, for the world. What are you optimistic for?
Oh, gosh, that's a lovely question. Oh, well, this morning I was drinking tea before I came to meet you and Richie, and I could hear the birds, and I felt like spring was around the corner. And, that's not that I don't like winter, but I'm optimistic for the fact that life keeps moving, I suppose. And, we're alive, and there's a whole world out there, people to love, places to go, moments to have. And I'm really optimistic for the human condition, I suppose, that I see so many people. There's such bad stuff happens. I know that. I try not to categorize things in good or bad, but there's rubbish stuff going on. And I'm really optimistic for the fact that there are more people that are the opposite to that than there are those that, and so many of us that we might all just be finding our own way and doing it badly, but that good intent, right? That human intent to live and grow. So yeah.
What a lovely note to end on. For everybody listening in, Richie has had a problem with his internet, so it's been more of a one-to-one conversation this time. But lovely to have that conversation with you, Laura. And I'm just going to share a few reflections to put a bow on it. So we started with the obvious, which is that we're highly conditioned to be fast, and maybe it has ancestral origins. But when we move fast, we miss stuff and don't have space. And we need to slow down to be alive, to have a good impact and tune out the noise. And I think that's just such a simple and obvious lesson for all of us. Hard to do, but the prize is there. In reflection on where we are in the world today, we're still a bit in the fog post-pandemic, but the fire's coming back. I love that. We've got more oxygen, more optimism. and finding our space. You're a troublemaker. You like to mix things up, but you like to find the juice in life. What a great expression. And talk about what we're not talking about. And I think that's true for all of us, to sort of face into things and say it like it is. You went your own way, and being your own boss is wild. I'm just discovering this, but it's absolutely true. And I, frankly, I just love the way you say that you love your life. I'm sure it's not perfect. I mean, you've shared that, but loving your life is a great thing. And you have freedom to choose. Walking one-to-ones, walking meetings, great thing to do. Go to the spaces that nourish you, and you can access them in the modern world and in modern living. We need to get our heads unstuck, pay attention in relation to others, be kind, show compassion, and have the right intent, and be able to laugh at ourselves. And when you talk about your ambition, you want to support others to walk well in the world. It's not just about the flying to the west coast of America and Asia, but to create flow in others' lives, which is fantastic. When we think about setbacks, because we have them all, potentially daily, how quickly can I let it go? Letting go of that angst and anger, maybe. And I love your optimism. Life keeps moving, and you've got places to go. We've all got places to go. It's what the whole show has all been all about. Laura, thank you. What a wonderful way to start 2023, and hope to help people through Blue Monday. So thank you again.
My pleasure, Mark. Thank you. And thanks to Richie too.